Welcome back to the podcast. You found us here on the Talk North Podcast Network. This is Wooden Sticks. I'm recording from the Aquarius Home Services studio. My name is Kevin Gorg, and I am wrapping up here in the final weeks of September my duties at Canterbury Park as track analyst. I will be filling in on closing day, which would be Saturday the 28th, as track announcer, because Paul Allen, our regular track announcer, will be with the Minnesota Vikings, who are off to a hot start this season. So we've got just a handful of days left in the racing schedule at Canterbury, and we are on the cusp of a brand new season with the Minnesota Wild. And at Bally Sports North, we're going to do a majority, if not 70 to 75 of the regular season games on our network. We're also going to cover 3 games in the preseason, which I'll get to here later in the show. But training camp just started. We had our big media day earlier this week, where both LaPanta and I had a chance to, we each take a room. We each got a camera guy. I had Pat Fisher. He had the great Ralph Gazow, and we had players cycle through to do 8 to 10 minutes one-on-one, kind of covering a bunch of ground as we get ready for the season. So it was really fun to get re-engaged with the hockey side of things, to see some of these players. Got to meet Yakov Trenin for the first time, the new addition in from Nashville, as advertised. Big like a horse, man. Big and strong, confident hockey player. Really looking forward to the opportunity. Mentioned Kirill Kaprizov as a guy that he's really excited about being teammates with and being on the same side, because when he played in Nashville, a lot of nights he was in charge of going out there and trying to check him, and he said it was no fun, because he said there are scorers in this league that do it with speed and skill, but Kirill does it with his speed, his skill, and his strength. And he said physically he's a very hard player to play against. I found that super interesting. Talked to Jared Spurgeon. He's healthy coming in. He hated watching last season. He hated having to go through multiple surgeries, but he feels good coming into training camp. The same when I had a chance to visit with Marcus Foligno. So that's really good news. You know, the Wild are in a position right now where I think if they're fully healthy, they're gonna turn some heads this year. If they can keep their main guys in the lineup, they are going to be a problem in the Western Conference. What happened last year is, if you look at the man games missed, that's bad enough. But then you look at which players were missing, and at the time of the season, they missed. You know, Spurgeon was basically the entire year. He got hurt in one of our preseason games right before the regular season started down in Chicago. We were doing the game on Bally Sports, and it didn't look bad, but it didn't look, like it was going to be anything long-term. And then we found out there were multiple things going on, and the rest is history. He tried to come back. It didn't work. He had both those surgeries, and here we are. But then at every juncture of the season, I look at Foligno getting hurt, Kaprizov, Brodin, at every time throughout the year, especially after the coaching change, when they would get some traction, they'd have another guy go down. And with where they're at right now, logistically, they just didn't have the depth to maintain that position. And in the end of the year, they came up short. I think they're motivated to get back. I think people forget that a bulk of the roster that was here the 2 years prior put up north of 100 points in both years and had home ice in the playoffs. So this is a core that is used to winning, that knows how to get the job done and has the star power to do it. And we're going to talk to Kevin Falness today on the show, and I'm really excited to hear his point of view on where this team is. He lived it. I mean, they do every single game, every preseason game, every regular season game, and God willing, every postseason game. And he's done it, and he's done it for 2 decades, and he's great at what he does. So I want to hear his perspective on how he views the season and this hockey team. And then, as we break it down, we're going to look at some of the betting odds and how Vegas views this hockey team, where the Wild land in terms of their odds on the landscape of sports betting, because that's a real thing. And I partake. I think a lot of Minnesotans make the trip down to Diamond Joe's or go over to Wisconsin to Turtle Lake to make said wagers. Well, we're going to find out where the so-called experts have the Wild slotted, and is there any chance they can move up or down from that point. So we'll have a great conversation with Kevin Falness about that. But being that it's Wooden Sticks, we're also going to hear his career path, how he ended up being the anchor on the Wild Radio Network. Yeah, he's there every single night running that broadcast. working with, it was Bob Kurtz and Tom Reed. Now it's Joe O'Donnell and Tom Reed, and he's been there for every moment along the way, including that crazy fun run back in 2003. So Kevin Falness from the Wild Radio Network today on Wooden Sticks. Before we get there, though, I got to talk to you about our newest addition here on the Talk North team. His name is Andrew Height. Most people in town know him as Whitey. He gets the job done. And if you're listening and you've got a business or a friend or family member that has a business that wants to be a part of the show, be a sponsor of this podcast, Andrew Height's the guy to talk to. AHEYDT at talknorth.com. The White Dog will get it done for you time and time again. And our biggest sponsor and biggest supporter of the show, my dear friend John Schweitz, and my friends with Minnesota Masonic Charities. They do so much great work in our community, from the Masonic Cancer Center at the U of M to the Masonic Children's Hospital, and of course the Masonic Home over in Bloomington. These are just a few examples of what they do. The Freemasons are a big, big supporter of people here in Minnesota. It's the largest fraternal organization in the world, and they consistently answer that call when it comes to our charitable needs. Thank you to John Schweitz and the Minnesota Masonic Charities for being a part of the show. When we come back on Wooden Sticks from the Wild Radio Network, it's the wonderful Kevin Falness. Okay, we're back on Wooden Sticks. We are recording live from the Aquarius Home Services studio. It is a great time of year to be a hockey fan, and opening of training camp, media day in the rearview mirror, and radio broadcast this weekend. The first Wild preseason game of the calendar year. No better time to catch up with the voice of the Wild Radio Network, my dear friend Kevin Falness. Welcome to Wooden Sticks, sir.
I am not the voice of Minnesota Wild hockey on the radio. That belongs to Joe O'Donnell. Previously, it belonged to Bob Kurtz. I'm just a voice on Minnesota Wild hockey, but it's very wonderful to be with you, Mr. Kevin Gorg.
Well, and that's the conversation I want to start with, because here on Wooden Sticks, we'd like to go back to where it all began. And you and I are roughly the same age. You're a little bit younger, but you've been doing this for the better part of 2 decades. As long as I've been coming to the Excel Energy Center, you and I have been bumping into each other. We've been having those conversations. We've been teasing LaPanta about his fresh little steaks and Kowalski's and all that good stuff. But how did you end up here? Like, what led you to broadcasting in the first place? When you were just a little youngster, how did you fall in love with this aspect of a career?
You know, it's funny. I actually went to high school in St. Louis Park. We call it God's country around these parts, but St. Louis Park is a great place if you wanted to get into broadcasting as a young man. And our school, I don't think they have it anymore, but back in the day, we actually had our own radio studio down there, KDXL. I don't remember the numbers on the dial, but we had our own radio station there. Pete Peterson was the instructor, longtime instructor at St. Louis Park, who unfortunately has passed away, but helped a lot of us cut our teeth in it. And, you know, back in those days, again, I graduated in 1990 from high school. So we're talking about the late 80s. It's carts, it's reel to reel, it's grease pencil. When I was doing it down there, I was doing it just for fun. I mean, I'm hitting Grateful Dead and Led Zeppelin. I'm trying to be so cool, and probably no one was even listening, but we were having a good time getting used to the feel of what it's like to be in a radio station, not knowing that would be my eventual career path. And I took that, and I guess that fed my desire to pursue it later in life. And that's what I did once I left St. Louis Park, took a year in Mankato, and they promptly kicked me out of there. I had to figure out what I wanted to do, ended up at Brown Institute. Long story short, to have an internship at KFAN where I wanted to be, I had to be in school and vice versa. So ended up interning at KFAN back in the early 90s, the very early portion of KFAN in the very much formative years, in the days of Mike Morris, Bob Yates, Kenny Olson. Yeah, Dan Cole was he was just a little board op at the time. Dubé was a board op. Dubé and I took turns working overnights at KFN in the 90s, in the early 90s, working at Frontenac, where if it rained, the basement got flooded, and mice, you could see them on the rafts floating out of the place. It was pretty disgusting, but they've come a long way since then, and I guess you could say in some ways so have I.
It's amazing because when that concept first came of age in the early 90s, it had never been, heard of before. Like, we used to alternate on WCCO radio at the top and the bottom of the hour for like little 2-minute sports updates, little vignettes. And for all of us that were sports junkies, when the fan came into existence and they were talking about having 24 hours of sports radio, it was like when MTV came for us who are a little bit older than you, Kev, in the 80s with music videos. It was Nirvana. And so I do remember the personalities, Bob Yates being one of the more unique ones in our market. And I just remember being the sports junkie that I was, being so excited to be able to turn my radio on at any point in the day and have a sports station. Now, with Sirius XM, you can turn on all kinds of specific sports radio, but back then this was unheard of. It had to be really cool to be there when that whole thing was born.
It was neat because I mean it was so different, and at that time it's so different now compared to where it was then. Not only in the fact that you can find whatever you want now, but back then you didn't have access to a computer, really. I mean, we're talking about the early 90s, like 1993. I remember the coolest part of that job was I was into fantasy football. I no longer am. It drives me crazy because I'm not good at it. But at that time I was into fantasy football, and I was working the fantasy football show. I don't know if Charge was involved at that time, but John the Commissioner Havermeyer was. And I remember I had access to the sports ticker. I knew the stats. I knew everything about each and every game before any of my buddies. So I was calculating scores before they even got the morning paper the next day. And I thought that was neat. I was working, it's not like I was working Vikings, Twins, North Stars at this time. I was working Gopher baseball with Ryan Lefevre running the board for him. Just little things like that. I remember riding to two different events. Like I think we did like a Twins Media Day, and at the time the program director was Mark Ginther, and I was picking his brain about some of the young bucks on their staff, like a Chad Hartman. He's only got that job because of Sid, right? Oh no, I was put in my place. That's not why he has. He's actually very good at his job, and it was little things like that. This was the formative years of Kevin Falness, and it was so cool to be at the ground level of KFAN and watch, and especially looking at where it's come from that point to now.
And let's get into the Wild Radio Network because, early 90s, I think of the North Stars leaving for Dallas. I think of that gap in time from 1993 roughly to the dawn of 2000 where we didn't have an NHL team. And it's preposterous to think about it for a lot of the young people that might listen to this show. But, we didn't have an NHL team. So now 2000 comes around and the Minnesota Wild are born. For you being in the business now and having that experience cutting your teeth both at Brown and at the Fan, how much did that influence you taking over at some point on the Wild Radio Network?
Well, part of my internship at KFAN, which evolved into a board op position, a technical director, I guess you could call it. I was working on the Vikings radio network with the great Dan Rowe and Joe Sensor and some of those names. But the guy that helped get me, my foot in the door in the industry was Tim Spence. He was the producer basically for the Vikings, what I am now for the Minnesota Wild. And in about 1995, he decided to leave the Vikings radio network and moved to Denver to start an all sports station. He talked me into moving with him. I'm a young kid at that point in time. I'm not married. I don't have kids. I don't even know if I had a dog at that point. And I just picked up all my stuff. I'm like, sounds great. We went to Denver and we started this all new sports station. And the reason why they were starting it was because they were getting the rights to the Denver Nuggets and the eventual rights to the Quebec Nordiques, which became the Colorado Avalanche. So I got to experience, it was the best time of life to be a sports fan, even though I wasn't a Denver sports fan or a Colorado sports fan. Being in Denver in 1995 and starting an all sports station surrounding the Nordique and the Nuggets, it was fantastic because college football was awesome there. The Buffs were great. I mean, you think about some of the names. I mean, Ray Caruth is not a name you like to talk about now, but at the time, Cordell Stewart, their running back, I can't think of his name now. You know the name I'm thinking, Bieniemy, Eric Bieniemy.
Yes,
I mean,
sir.
These were the epic teams of college football at that time with some of the big monsters of the country. And then throw on the top of that, they had the Mile High with John Elway, Terrell Davis, McCaffrey. I mean, it was just amazing to be a sports fan at that time. And then Coors Field had just recently opened up, and the Blake Street Bombers and Anders Galarraga and the older Dante Bichette. I mean, it was Larry Walker. It was an amazing time to be a sports fan there, even though I didn't have a rooting interest in any of these teams. I got on board real quick. And then to see the Nordique become the Colorado Avalanche, and you think about some of those names that were on that team coming from Quebec. I mean, they were gifted a hell of a franchise. And Peter Forsberg, Joe Sakic, Adam Foote, Wendell Clark was even on that team. He bolted there right after that. Sandis Ozolinsh. They ended up trading for Patrick Waugh, and then the rest is history. Got a chance to watch him win the Stanley Cup in 1996 when they ousted the Mike Russo's Florida Panthers. I mean, I'm going on and on about Denver sports. So fast forward, how did I end up back in Minnesota? Well, I'm a Minnesota boy. I'm a hockey boy. And even though I got a chance to watch the Colorado Avalanche, Minnesota's my home. So I would say once they were awarded the franchise in 1998, I started hammering the phone lines and calling anyone that would answer the phone. Karin Anderson was one of the first people I talked to. Brian Hutchinson, no longer with the Minnesota Wild, was like their website guy, one of their PR guys. I hammered him, and then eventually I ended up in the ear of Bill Robertson. A couple of times I called him at home. I didn't have any right to do that, but you know Billy, he's nice enough to take my call, and it evolved into us. I had to convince them they needed the position. They believed me, and here we are almost 25 years later.
Incredible. And I didn't know the whole backstory with the Denver angle, being a huge Broncos fan, remembering the Mile High salute, Terrell Davis, my
Oh my
all-time
God, it was
favorite
awesome.
quarterback,
Yeah.
John Elway. What a time to
Elway
be out
doing the
there.
helicopter, awesome.
Oh, so cool. Beating the Packers, of course, and Brett Favre was an epic Super Bowl at the turn of the century there. So you get to work with Bob Kurtz for the better part of 2 decades. And Bob Kurtz, I grew up with, right? Like I turned on my TV or my radio as a kid in the Twin Cities, and you couldn't get away from Bob Kurtz, just a Minnesota broadcasting legend. I look back at that time for you, Kevin, and the run that the Wild had in the early 2000s with that dramatic trip to the Western Conference Finals, but working alongside Bob Kurtz and then obviously Tom Reed, who now again is a Hall of Fame broadcaster, this could only have made your career that much more enjoyable.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, when I came here, it was a blank slate. We didn't know what became the Minnesota Wild Radio Network, what it would look like. I was told by Bill Robertson that they were in conversations with this guy named Bob Kurtz, and of course, I'd heard the name Tom Reed from his work with. And the North Stars with the Gophers. I'm not old enough to remember him as a player, but people tell me he was a pretty good one, and he'll tell you about the goal he scored on Ken Dryden via a penalty shot back in the early 1940s. And all that's awesome. But to be able to work with Bob Kurtz, the consummate professional. I mean, when he's on the air, it doesn't matter if he's in the dumps off the air, if he's under the weather, if he's sick. When he cracks the mic, man, he is a legend. And in my mind, one of the best in the business, and I've listened to them all. I love Rick Jenneret. I love the guys up in Toronto. Doc Emmerich. They're all fantastic. But for my money, pound for pound, I'll take Bob Kurtz any day of the week, especially if he's calling the hometown team. He was that much fun to work with, and we honor him to this day with the Bob Kurtz Radio Center. He's not gone; he's just retired. He's out on Lake Pepin enjoying the summer breeze that is out there, and maybe playing the occasional round of golf with his wife Lori. But I will treasure those 2 decades with every ounce of my being. I was so fortunate to be able to work with him and to continue to this day to still work with Tom Reed.
And I marvel at the passion Tom Reed still has, like for everything he does. Like I went over after the first day of training camp. We had media day a couple of days ago, so I stopped over to have the salad bar at Tom Reed's Hockey City Pub. It's spectacular. If you're in St. Paul over the lunch hour, swing through there. And Tom's there every day. And this is a guy in his 70s, Kevin, that every day is on site, saying hello to the customers, making sure the business is operating properly. And he's gearing up for another 82 game schedule plus preseason plus playoffs. This could be a 100 plus games on the radio, and he's still there answering the bell day in day out, doing 2 jobs. This guy is a wonder in my eyes. Amazing.
Yeah, it's I watch him and he is a marvel. You look at Tom Reed, the curator, and down there at Tom Reed's Hockey City Pub, he's more than just a smiling face that walks around and shakes people's hands. He does that a lot, but I mean, he's back on the fryer half the time, or he's digging out a cellar by hand himself. I mean, he's done some marvelous things. You get a chance to go down there. There's the things that you see up front, but there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. I don't know how he does it, plus that 100-game schedule that you're talking about on the Minnesota Wild Radio Network. The thing that really is wondrous about Tom Reed is that travel schedule, because it's hard for a guy any age. You know how it is. I mean, you get on that plane, it's not like they're traveling by horse and buggy like when he started. They're going on a nice little charter and they stay in the best hotels. But I mean, it's a grind to get on that plane every year, and now he's in his late 70s. That's not an easy task to perform, and he would not have it any other way. I know COVID was an absolute nightmare for him for so many reasons. It was for the entire country, but for a broadcaster like Tom, who lives and breathes traveling to these different destinations and shaking people's hands and having the conversations, that was taken off his plate. And I think it made him realize how much he really does enjoy that travel and being able to make eye contact with people and talk to them across the league. And I'll tell you what, you go to any other market and ask them where their place to go in Minnesota when they're covering the Minnesota Wild, it's Tom Reed's Hockey City Pub. It's a staple across North America when it comes to the NHL circuit.
No, well stated, and looking forward to another year of traveling with TR and our guy Joe O'Donnell. So let's take a look at the Minnesota Wild and the outlook for the season. I this morning was crunching the numbers at FanDuel Sportsbook. I love to take a peek. We've got Diamond Joe's just over the border if Minnesotans like to sneak down for a legal wager. And I'm looking at the Stanley Cup odds. All right, and so let me read these to you, Falness, and let me get your first blush impression of these odds. The Cup favorite is the Edmonton Oilers at 8-1, the runner-up from last year. Makes sense. Florida's 10-1, second choice. Then New Jersey 11-1, Colorado 11-1, Dallas Stars 12-1, Rangers 13-1, Vegas 14-1, Carolina 14-1, Maple Leafs 15-1. Andrew Brunette and the Nashville Predators are 16-1, Tampa 17-1, Boston 18-1. And here's where the rubber meets the road. So in Vegas's eyes, the top 5 teams in the West are clear cut. Edmonton, Colorado, Dallas, Vegas, and Nashville. At least by the betting odds, there's a pretty significant gap from them to the next 4 in the West. We know 8 teams make the playoffs. Kings are 23-1. Vancouver's 23-1. The Wild are 25-1. Winnipeg is 26-1. There are 9 teams at 26-1 or lower. That's the bad news. The good news is Vegas believes there's even a bigger gap to the rest of the West, which goes all the way down to St. Louis at 65-1, Seattle at 70-1, Utah at 75, Calgary at 170, Chicago at 220-1, and the longest 2 odds to win the Cup are Anaheim and San Jose at 400-1. So I guess the good news, if you're a Wild fan, is they're the 8th betting favorite in the West. They're 8 of 9. And then there's a significant gap to the rest of the West. So people ask me every time I'm at the grocery store, or running to the rink, or wherever I am at Tom Reed's the other day, are the Wild a playoff team? I emphatically say every single time, if they're healthy, they are. What do you think of these odds, and what do you think of their chances to be a playoff team next year?
Well, I mean, that's the wild card. There's two items there that jump off the page for me when I think about this Minnesota Wild team and what they're going to do this season. Can they stay healthy? I mean, that's the big thing. And then the goaltending. Who's going to step forward, be in that 3-headed monster between Fleury, Gustafsson, and Volstead, and who's going to take the reins and play 60-some games if they need to? I think they've got the potential. We know what Gustafsson did 2 years ago. We know what Marc-Andre Fleury has done, what his resume looks like, and we know the future looks bright for Jesper Volstead. He got a rocky start in that game he got in early January, but after that, once he put that in the rearview mirror and did his thing down there in Iowa and got an opportunity to show what he can do on the big stage, he looked the part. He more than looks the part. I mean, they're talking about him and Askarov, the kid out of San Jose, as being the 2 biggest prospects in goaltending right now in as far as the National Hockey League goes. So if you can tell me the Wild are gonna get good goaltending and they can stay healthy, without a doubt, I think they're a top 8 team in the Western Conference. But those are big ifs because they don't have a lot of room for error, as we saw last year. If they stumble and they hit that injury bug, unfortunately, there's not a lot in the well there to draw from.
And I think this is a really pivotal year. John Hines' first year with a full season, a full training camp, his staff, the way he wants it. Capiano brought in to be a key assistant coach. He was the coach with the New York Islanders in recent past. He's going to be, I think, a catalyst on that penalty kill for this hockey team. And then you look at the schedule. You know it well. You've got all this preseason radio work to do, but when the rubber really meets the road on October the 10th, Dean Evison and Columbus in town. The Wild get these 2 home games to start their season, which is great. And then they spend the rest of the month on the road, 2 different road trips, but a very difficult 7-game stretch on the road. As I look at this, Kev, this month of October, I don't want to say it's make or break, but it's extremely important for this team to get off to a halfway decent start before we get to November.
Yeah, I mean, we know how it started last year for him, and it ended up costing Dean Evison his job. John Hines, caught lightning in a bottle for his first almost just over a dozen games, and then they kind of fell back to earth a little bit. But yeah, you can't afford to get behind the 8 ball that early on. And we talk about it all the time. I don't. I'm sure you guys talk about it on TV. I wouldn't know. I mute it because I'm on the radio at the exact same time. But, there is something to the fact that maybe this opportunity to have that extended trip on the road in the month of October, not only that, whatever it is, 6, 7, 8 games in a row, but the entire month of October, it feels like it's going to be away from XL Energy Center. Take a little bit of the pressure off, get away from that home ice. Not that they've got a bunch of layups in that first month, but they get a chance to be together on the road and do their thing and probably have their rookie dinner and all that other good stuff. I think it very well could play in their favor. Now, on the other hand, when you go to Florida, you go to Tampa Bay, you take on Columbus, and you go to some of these, tough arenas and tough areas, you have an opportunity to really stub your toe. If they don't do that and they can come through October all smiles, boy, that would really put their season on the right pace.
So let's get back to the goaltending. I think as you handicap this, you see 3 goalies in the mix. I think all 3 have the potential to be what the Wild need them to be. And I look at last year and the analytics around it. And if the Wild get even last year with the injuries, league average goaltending, they likely end up in the mid 90s to upper 90s in points and make the playoffs. So that being said, looking for league average, not looking for Vezina trophies and all kinds of record book material, looking for league average goaltending, roughly 90 to 91% saves. I'm going to pencil in Marc-Andre Fleury, Mr. Falness, for 30 to 35 games come hell or high water. All right. Yep. He's a veteran. He's come back. This is probably his last year. He's solid. I thought he was solid last year. So there's your 30 to 35 games. That leaves roughly 45 to 50 games between the other 2, the Gus Bus and Volstead. And I think really it comes down to Philip Gustafsson. And I think of all the players that hit the ice this week for training camp, the most important player with the most pressure on him is Philip Gustafsson. If he's good and he plays like he did 2 years ago, the decision for the coaches is going to be easy. And he's going to likely get 40 to 45 of those games, mixing in Volstead to make sure he continues his progress as a young potential star goalie in this league. If Gustafsson gets off to a slow start, then everything changes. How do you handicap it?
Yeah, I think exactly what you said. Marc-Andre Fleury is going to be the backup no matter who steps forward to the other 2 because he's not a guy that I think at this point in his career can play 60 to 65 games. And I don't think you need that anyway. I think it's going to be incumbent upon Gustafsson or Volstead to take the reins and make that person the number 1 guy. If Gustafsson, remember that the numbers Gustafsson put in 2 years ago, especially down the stretch, he was putting up Vezina type numbers down when the games mattered the most 2 years ago and solidified his spot as a guy who deserved to be a number 1 goaltender in the NHL. Last year, he took a step back. So if that same Gustafsson from 2 years ago shows up and is your number 1 guy, that gives Bill Guerin and the rest of the coaching staff the latitude to put Volstead back into the American Hockey League with Iowa and free up some of that space, give him a chance to season a little bit, and see where it goes. If Gustafson stubs his toe or his skate in this instance, then call up Volstead. You send Gustafson out the back door. You trade him and get whatever you can for him. And then it's the Volstead Marc-Andre Fleury show. I think eventually Volstead's going to be the number one goaltender on this roster in this franchise. There's no doubt about it. He's the number one goaltender, and he's the goaltender of the future. The question is that time now? And I can't wait till we get there. I hope it's at some point this season. If it's not, though, it's because Gustafson forced their hand, and it's going to be Gustafson and Flower the rest of the way. But I mean, time will tell. We won't know until I think October will tell you a whole heck. You know what? Hell, training camp might tell you a lot, but especially October. At some point or another, you're going to get a clear cut path for this team going forward.
And I know one thing from talking to Volstead this week. He was one of the guys I got to interview on media day, and I flat out asked him his goals for the year, and he was stone-faced saying, listen, I'll be very disappointed if I don't make the team out of training camp. I want to play this year. I'm ready to take the next step, and he feels confident he can do that. So I think the Wild coaching staff is going to have to really finesse this decision. They're going to put the best guy in the net every night to give them the best opportunity to win. And I think that is going to be a fascinating three-headed monster to kind of handicap as the season starts and progresses. So, John Hines has talked leading up to training camp about trying different combinations throughout the preseason to figure out how the lines are going to look. At least to start training camp, I'm going to run these lines by you. This is what he went with as we record today on a Thursday during training camp. Hartman centering the top line with Zuccarello and Kaprizov. Kev, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you go back to what has worked in the past. You've got to figure out a way to not only get Zuccarello sparked again, but you got to get Hartman sparked as well. And he had 20 goals last year, but he's a guy that has the potential to score 30-some goals. And you took Zuccarello away from Kaprizov, and he dried up. So get a chance to put these three back together. Kaprizov is going to get his numbers, and hopefully it helps spark his best buddy and Matt Zuccarello, and hopefully Hartman once again is the benefactor of that. You remember that ad the Wild put on not that long ago where Hartman's watching Zuccarello and Kaprizov pass around a cup of coffee back and forth, and he was waiting for his turn. Well, that's not a bad thing, because you can fall into 50 points just being on that line. But if they can find that magic again, it opens up some opportunities for the rest of the lineup.
They need two lines that can score. Every team does in this league, because I think, especially on the road where they're going to be throughout most of October, the opposition can set the matchup, and their top pair or their top checking line or both can take out your top line. To me, I believe, Kevin, that Matt Boldy is sitting on an enormous season. I see a young kid just growing day by day. He got off to that horrific start last year. I think it was a real opportunity for him to learn, and he did, and he ended up finishing the season in tremendous fashion. This is the kind of player that I think can keep up with Kaprizov and his numbers. This can be a 40-goal plus guy on a regular basis. So line number 2 to start training camp is Joel Eriksson Ek in between Matt Boldy and Marcus Johansson. How do you look at that line?
Yeah, it's so easy to root for Marcus Johansson. Good guy, all that good stuff, but his numbers have been lacking. And if he, much like Gustafson, another fellow Swede, if he stubs his toe coming out of the gate, there's some names on this roster that's waiting to take that position, whether it be a Liam Ogren or somebody else. But what you have in Boldy and what you have in Joel Eriksson Ek. To me, Joel Eriksson Ek is probably, and we've said this on the Beyond the Pond here for the last few years now, he's probably the MVP of this team. And that's not easy to say when you have a team with Kirill Kaprizov. But for my money, for what Joel Eriksson Ek does for this team, he's probably the MVP of this team on any given night when he's healthy and he's playing like Joel Eriksson Ek does. Pair him with Matt Boldy, and whoever's playing that other side it's incumbent upon them to keep up with the pace of play. I want Marcus Johansson to do that. I want him to succeed. But if he doesn't, I guarantee Liam Ogren is dying for a top 6 role.
I love the way coaches can play matchups. I love depth scoring, and I see that third line to start training camp with the offensive weapon that Marco Rossi can be, with two big bruising wings in Marcus Foligno and Yakov Trenin. Super interested in how this line meshes together, because chemistry isn't something that just automatically and organically happens. But if they mesh well, those two big rugged wings with Rossi in the middle making plays, there's the potential that Foligno could get back to that 15 to 20 goal mark. And man, I got to tell you, Falness, that would make this team a whole hell of a lot tougher to beat.
Yeah, and we know what type of player Foligno is, and he talked about how great his offseason was in getting through his rehabs, and he's feeling 100% coming into camp. That's fantastic, because you need him to be an integral role on this team. He doesn't have to score 20, 30 goals, but he's got to be a force, and he's got to be someone that the opposition has to reckon with. And when he's healthy, they do. And he's so much fun to watch. And I'll tell you what, Marco Rossi had a wonderful season last year, 21 goals for him, I believe, and he was fantastic. And if he and the confidence that he plays with and that he's built up over the course of the last 12 to 18 months, remember, he scored no goals, a handful of points in his first handful of games in the National Hockey League in what would be his quote unquote rookie season. His full blown rookie season was last year, and his confidence, thanks to a wonderful offseason, it showed through in spades once he got his first full crack at the National Hockey League. I can't wait to see a fully motivated and charged up Marco Rossi coming out of the gates. And, I think Foligno will be good. And Trenin, they love him. They love what he brings. Everybody talks about the grit. That guy, if he doesn't personify grit, I don't know who does.
Yeah, now you've got a pair in Foligno and Trenin that could be anchors on your penalty kill. It just gives you some flexibility with special teams. I'm confident Rossi's going to get plenty of looks on the power play. And I think the one thing we kind of know, I think there's going to be all kinds of shuffling with those top three lines. I think an anchor on the fourth line, and I think a solid fourth line with Freddie Gaudreau in the middle and Marat Husnudinov on the wing. I think those two are going to be a fixture together. Again, penalty kill guys for certain, good fourth line responsibility. And then the X factor is going to be how that wing goes. I think to start the season, it might be a guy like Liam Ogren, but I am fascinated, Kevin, with the idea that Marcus Johansson could still get some time on the power play, but you put him on that fourth line and look at the matchups they could get with who's Nadinov's speed, Johansson's playmaking, and a guy like Freddie Gaudreau, who had a down year last year, but I think he's a candidate for a real bounce back. Had a great conversation with him this week at training camp. He's got the new baby at home. He's got a new outlook on life. I think he's taking the pressure off of himself to be something he's not. Just go out there and be a good two-way player. And then you have the chance for Ogren to play with Eck and Boldy, and things really get interesting in my eyes. But Gaudreau and Husnudinov, I think, are going to be a driving force on that fourth line.
Yeah, it's funny when you talk about lightning rods for Wild fans out there. They hear Freddie Gaudreau, they hear Marcus Johansson, and those are the guys that attract a lot of the angst from the message boards. But again, much like Marcus Johansson, Freddie Gaudreau is super easy to root for. Man, I love talking to the guy. I love watching him try to do, but I know he struggled last year, and much like Marcus Johansson, it's incumbent upon him to regain his prior form, because he's got the ability, and especially when you talk about a penalty killer, he can be very good at that. But I know that he's had his issues. Last year was not a banner year for him or Marcus Johansson, so it's on them, put up or shut up. And if they can't do it, there are some guys waiting in the wings to take those spots. Again, I'm pulling for Freddie Gaudreau. He's very easy to root for. One of the all-time class guys within that Wild locker room.
So that's how the offensive set of forwards kind of mesh together. Let's talk about the blue line, because I think last year we did see if one of these top four misses significant time, it's going to be a real problem. And there are prices to pay, and when you're still paying Ryan Suter and Zach Parise in this final year, and I know people are sick and tired of talking about it, of thinking about it, of hearing about it, but the fact of the matter is, if you miss Jared Spurgeon for an entire season and Brodin misses time, it's going to be a problem, and it was last year. But as things line up right now, Kev, you get Brodin and Faber at the top, you get Middleton back with Spurgeon on that second pairing, and then Bogosian and a guy like Declan Chisholm on that third set, knowing that you've got Damon Hunt and John Merrill that are waiting in the wings that are good enough to be in that spot. I think the top 5 are pretty much cemented. I love this defensive core if and when they can stay healthy.
Can you imagine what last season would have been like if there was not a Brock Faber with
Oh,
Jared
God.
Spurgeon going down and only playing a handful of games? It was just incredible. And you think about what would have been if Jared Spurgeon was healthy all last year, which you would definitely like, but you wouldn't even have scratched the surface of knowing what Brock Faber was all about. And he comes in, splashes onto the scene, and just has a rookie season for the ages. I mean, especially in wild annals. Hard to think of anyone that's had a blue line experience like that as a rookie in the National Hockey League, like a Brock Faber. So that was fantastic. But you're right. Now to get Jared Spurgeon back, he says he's feeling healthy. He's 100% ready to rock and roll. Jonas Brodin's healthy once again. And then you talk about the top 4 and bringing Middleton playing his role. And we know how well Middleton and Spurgeon got along when they were both healthy. And then put Brock Faber back there along with Jonas Brodin. If that's the combinations they end up going into camp with, I think they're going to be fantastic. That top 4 is, I don't know if I would say it's as good as it gets in the NHL, but it's in the top hemisphere. I don't know. I don't know where I would classify them as far as other NHL top 4s, but it's got to be right up there.
There might be better high-end, like, top pairs, but as
Yeah.
far as a 4-pack goes, if you look at Middleton, Spurgeon, Brodin, and Faber, the depth that top 4 has, the different things they can do with those defensemen, I'd put them up against just about anybody else's top 4. And then I think Wild fans have to respect and understand the value of Zach Bogosian. I watched this guy up close, and I marvel for a guy his size and how mobile he is and how efficient he is on the ice. And I would not sleep on the value that he brings to the table. And so that leads me to Declan Chisholm. And he's 24 years old. They picked him up on waivers from Winnipeg. You can't coach offense and goal scoring into a defenseman. He's got that already. He's got brilliant offensive skills. He can shoot the puck. He can move the puck. Last year, there were stretches where he was bad defensively. You can coach good defense into any hockey player as long as they have the basic skills that it takes. And is he big and strong enough? Yes. Can he skate? Absolutely. I think Declan Chisholm can be a real needle mover for this hockey team, where they can go from being a team that people are looking at right now at 25-1 as the 8th or 9th betting favorite in the West to a team that all of a sudden now can contend with the top echelon in their division. The teams like Colorado and Dallas and Nashville. This guy's that good, Kev. He's got that kind of skill, but I need to see a big step in the defensive zone because there were stretches last year where he got exposed.
Yeah, and that's the question. Is Declan Chisholm your number one guy on the top power play unit? If he is, that opens up opportunities for Spurgeon and Faber to go elsewhere. I mean, I love the fact that you have the potential of a Faber. We saw what he did last year playing the top unit, and we know what Spurgeon has done on his resume. But does Declan Chisholm jump into that role and force them to put him at the number 1 unit so that can lead to Spurgeon maybe operating on the penalty kill or Faber running the number 2 power play unit? I'm fascinated to see how Declan Chisholm takes this opportunity in training camp, in these preseason games, whenever he gets in there, and how that evolves in October and beyond.
And I think a big factor, too, last year with those injuries is Declan Chisholm was playing more minutes and in bigger and tougher matchups because of the lack of depth, missing Spurgeon and then having Brodin get hurt. He was put into a situation where he couldn't show his very best. I like him right where he is with a physical, stay-at-home, smart defenseman like Zach Bogosian, where he can show off his aggressive skills, take the puck and make plays, and then be a catalyst on that power play. All this hinges on the Wild, staying moderately healthy. It's the NHL.
Yeah.
It's 82 games. Guys are going to get hurt. And I think if you're a Wild fan, you have to understand, I don't think it's going to be the impactful players or the amount of games we saw last year. And now some of those younger players, and I mentioned Liam Ogren as being one. Damon Hunt's going to get a look if there are injuries. These are the players that have to allow this team to maintain when some of those injuries pop up, because the odds of Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Boldy and Jonas Brodin and Jared Spurgeon and Brock Faber again next year, all playing 82 games, is astronomically. It's not going to happen. And so you've got to have some of those depth guys show up. And that's why when I go to training camp, I'm watching Ogren. I'm watching Damon Hunt, Declan Chisholm. I'm looking at Yakov Trenin. These are players that can allow this team to withstand some of those injuries that are going to pop up.
Let me ask you this. This is your fancy podcast, but let me turn the tables on you. 50 goals, 100 points. Kirill Kaprizov, can he do it this year? If he, assuming all things are equal, he stays healthy. Over under at 50, over under at 100 points. What do you think?
100 points is something I would expect. Like, to me, that's an expectation. 50 goals is not an expectation. Somewhere in the 40s, I think, is very realistic. But I think 100 points, with the way this guy racks them up on the power play and the amount of ice time he gets at crunch time, he's just too good a player. And it's funny, you talk to some of his teammates. One of the questions we had to ask this week when all those guys came filing in is, how has he been able to evolve as a player? His teams have realized how good he is, and teams have basically come into every game against the Wild knowing that that's the one guy they have to shut down. How has he been able to continue to produce? And veteran players like Foligno and Zuccarello kept pointing to the same thing. The guy never stops working. Watch him at the rink when it's not a game day. Watch the work that he puts in, watch how he trains, and then watch how much he cares when the game starts. Matt Zuccarello said it best. He's like, I've never been around a guy that wants to win more than Kirill. And I think that's what drives him game in and game out. He knows he has to produce. To me, I'll be very interested. You put the number out there, 50 and 100 for him. I'll put the number out there, 40 and 90 for Matt Boldy. And I think, Kevin, both are legitimately possible and maybe even probable this year.
And to me, if Kaprizov scratches the surface towards 50 and Boldy scratches the surface towards 40, then that's a playoff team. That tells me those two guys stayed healthy. And I think, it's not going to be just them. And you do have to have goaltending, but those are two big integral parts to this team. If they can get it done. Remember, Kaprizov, by the way, had 46 goals in 75 games last year. He was missing in action until the coaching change with just 2 goals in the month of October. If he can get off to a regular start as opposed to a cold start, I think 50 is definitely within grasp. But if he gets 45-ish and Boldy gets 40, then there's no doubt that this team should be on their way back to the playoffs.
That's exciting, and that's kind of why we wanted to have this conversation today here to kind of set the tone for the Wild season. Are you ready? I know it's going to be 80 degrees out again throughout the week here, but I know this weekend your broadcast partners, Mr. Joe O'Donnell and Mr. Tom Reed, are heading north of the border to Winnipeg. Are you ready to crank it up this weekend with Wild Radio hockey?
I'll tell you what, I mean, we haven't had a broadcast since probably mid-April, I guess, was the last time we actually cracked the mics on the Minnesota Wild Radio Network. So we've fired it up. We're ready to go. We've done some updates to the Bob Kurtz Radio Center down in St. Paul in the bowels of XL Energy Center. We're putting together all the behind-the-scenes stuff that it doesn't just magically happen on your radio. So we have to do all the legwork to get it going. But I talked to Tom Reed this morning. I saw Joe O'Donnell. They've both been doing their voice exercises, eating their lozenges, gargling hot, salty water. So I think we're all ready to go. Now it's a matter of dropping the puck. Actually, we're on the air 6:45 Saturday night from Winnipeg in the Twin Cities. You'll hear it on Cool 108. That's 107.9 FM. And of course, you can hear it via wild.com. And I think there's a chance they're going to stream it on wild.com as well, pulling it off the Winnipeg scoreboard. So they're going to marry it up with our radio call, and it should be just magical for everyone as game one of 100 plus hits the airwaves starting Saturday night.
Can't wait. This has really got me excited for the hockey season. This is Wooden Sticks. That was the incomparable Kevin Falness, who we will find night in, night out on your radio dial here in the Twin Cities on KFAN 100.3. I'll be back after this quick break to put a wrap on another episode of Wooden Sticks. Okay, that was fun. Kevin Falness and I, we kid a lot. He gets the Mute TV thing going. He gets after LaPanta for those steak dinners on Sunday night. But I got to tell you, from being around him now, this will be my 19th year covering the team on Valley Sports, which was previously Fox Sports North. We have a great relationship. We have a great time working together at the rink. And there's teamwork involved. Every intermission we're looking for players, and radio needs this, TV needs that. And, we put Aaron Sickman and his crew to the test on a nightly basis. But the bottom line is we love what we do, and we love working with the Minnesota Wild. And so the radio broadcast schedule starts this weekend. If there is a game, they're covering it. As far as our broadcast schedule on Bally Sports North goes, we will start on Wednesday night. That's right. Next week, the 25th, Wednesday night, the Wild are in Dallas to take on their rivals, the Stars. That night will be on. And then both October the 1st and October the 4th. So Tuesday the 1st is a home game where the Wild will be playing the Blackhawks. It's the final home game on the preseason schedule. So most hockey fans realize that's the dress rehearsal night where I think you're going to see from top to bottom all the star players. I think you're going to see a sneak peek at what head coach John Hines will have in place the following week on the 10th when it starts for real. So circle October 1st on your calendar. That home game against Bedard and the Blackhawks will be on Bally Sports. And then that Friday night, the rematch in Chicago. Now, I don't know if Bedard will be here on the 1st, but I can almost assume on the 4th, their final preseason game, that might be the dress rehearsal night for the Chicago Blackhawks, and Connor Bedard will likely be in the lineup along with new captain Nick Foligno, the brother of Marcus, and the rest of the hated Chicago Blackhawks. That'll be fun on the 4th of October. So those are our preseason games on Bally Sports North, and it starts for real. Just 3 weeks now till the opener. Going to be an emotional night. It's October the 10th. It's Dean Evison coming back for the first time. It's the Columbus Blue Jackets who had all that heartbreak that we talked about a couple weeks ago here with the passing of Johnny Hockey, Johnny Gaudreau. So that certainly will be, because it's the opener, a special night, but an emotional night. And the Wild will have those 2 home games on the 10th against Columbus, on the 12th against the Seattle Kraken. And then the rest of the month, we will be on the road. It's going to be 2 road trips, one that goes to Winnipeg and St. Louis. We come home for a couple of days, and then we go to Columbus, Florida, Tampa, Philly, and Pittsburgh. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to getting hockey season started, and all kinds of great guests along the way here on Wooden Sticks. And once again, thank you for taking the time to listen to the show. You can find up all those different shows if you can archive it right there at the Wooden Sticks logo near the Talk North Pod Network. We've got some wonderful shows going all the way back to Lou Nanne. That's right, the great Lou Nanne. If you want to circle back to our very first show, which was last winter, right before he took over and did his final state tournament broadcast in downtown St. Paul. Lou Nanne, the iconic one. We're going to have some fun circling back with him, as he'll be a part of our broadcast schedule on Bally Sports this year, and he promised he'd come back on the show and join us on Wooden Sticks again. Until next week, thanks again for being part of the show. We'll talk to you soon.